Ruth Buzzi went on the Laugh-In set in 1970 for what looked like any other sketch. Soon after, she said something that would ruin her career. The FBI began to watch her. Sponsors stopped giving her money, and the makers of the show got a threatening phone call that turned everything around. Finally, the truth about TV's most controversial moment is coming out, and it's worse than anyone thought. In 1967, there was a common trend to comedy shows on TV. It was easy to guess how jokes and sketches would end, and variety shows always went at the same speed. However, Friendly and George Schlatter had other ideas. Their goal was to make a show that felt alive and matched the crazy energy of the outside world. They were inspired by counterculture events like Love-Ins and Be-Ins to make Laugh-In, a comedy project that would break all the rules of TV. Schlatter said it was an assault on the senses. There wasn't any build-up to the jokes or time for people to catch their breath during the show. Instead, it kept coming out with one joke after another very quickly. There were more than 350 short segments in each show that ranged from slapstick to satire to weird humor. The pace was constant, and nothing went on for too long. A comic would make a sharp political joke 1 second, and then someone would dance across the screen in a silly outfit the next. There were many sources of ideas. Its humor came from vaudeville and burlesque. It was hard to guess because Ernie Kovacs' experimental style made it so. But British humor had the most impact on it. A clever TV show called That Was the Week That Was had already shown that it was possible to talk about politics and social problems on TV. That idea was turned up to 11 by Schlatter and Friendly. The show never felt preachy or predictable because they used both smart criticism and silly jokes. The building itself felt different. Fast cuts and sudden changes were common in British humor, but Laugh-In took this idea to a whole new level. Things in sketches didn't have a clear start or end. Some jokes were funny out of the blue. People in the theater wouldn't have time to react before scenes changed. This spirit of chaos wasn't a mistake. It was meant to capture how things feel in modern life, where everything is happening at once. Some watchers found it too much to handle. Some people couldn't get enough. It wasn't easy to get the show on TV. The leaders at the networks didn't know what to think when Schlatter and Friendly pitched it to them. I thought the structure was too risky. It felt like the pace was too fast. On September 9, 1967, NBC finally agreed to show a single bonus show. They didn't think it would go very far because it was just a test. But the crowd responded right away. The scores were good. It was being talked about. NBC quickly ordered a full season within a few months. Everything that came after the first show was based on it. The show was led by Dan Rowan and Dick Martin, who joked around with each other quickly. It got even more interesting when guest stars like Barbara Feldon and Flip Wilson joined in. The show's unique style was first shown in recurring parts like The Cocktail Party and Mod World. Comics would say one-liners through small doors on the joke wall, which became a signature piece. There was also news of the future, which made crazy statements. Some of them came true, like Ronald Reagan becoming president. NBC first thought that Laugh-In would just fill a time spot and give long-running shows like Gunsmoke a run for their money. But by the end of its second season, it was the most popular show on TV. It was liked by everyone. Kids and adults could both watch it together. Some people liked the silly humor, while others liked the biting criticism. Laugh-In had something that would make everyone laugh. Even though Dan Rowan and Dick Martin didn't seem to go together, that's what made their Laugh-In so great. They first did shows in bars where they developed a comedy act based on differences between people. Rowan was the smooth talker who was always in charge, while Martin played the dummy who had no idea what was going on. The chemistry between them carried over to TV. When it first aired on January 22, 1968, Laugh-In was different from everything else on TV. It was quick, random, and full of one-liners and silly skits. More than that, the show became the most watched show in America by the 8th episode. Rowan and Martin made sure that things didn't go totally crazy. Even when everything else around them was a mess, their back-and-forth chatter gave the show structure. Martin would say something stupid, Rowan would laugh, people would really enjoy it. Their ending to each show, with Rowan saying, "Say goodnight, Dick," and Martin answering, "Good night, Dick," became one of the most famous TV phrases. They were more than just hosts, though. Rowan played the over-the-top military figure General Bullwright, and Martin played Leonard Swizzle, a drunk partygoer who was always a little too drunk to do anything. The show moved so quickly that there was no time to prepare for the next sketch. If you missed a joke, another one was already coming. That kind of wild energy was new to TV, and it changed comedy for good. Without Laugh-In, shows like Saturday Night Live would not be possible. Some of Laugh-In's biggest stars didn't even have a big name when they started. One of them was Goldie Hawn. Her first appearance on the show was in 1968. She was a bubbly blonde who laughed at every joke. She wasn't acting, that much was clear. George Schlatter, the producer, told her not to practice so that her responses would be real. People loved her laugh so much that it spread quickly. 2 years after that, for Cactus Flower, she won an Oscar and became one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. Lily Tomlin joined in 1969 and made a name for herself right away. She did more than just act. She made up personalities. Someone who had a loud voice and made life hard for everyone who picked up the phone was Ernestine, one of her best characters. "One ringy-dingy, is this the party I'm calling?" Then there was Edith Ann, a 5-year-old who sat in a big rocking chair and gave long monologues that always ended with, "And that's the truth." Tomlin was one of the show's biggest stars because she could make characters that people would remember. She had more success after that. She went on to star in movies like 9 to 5 and become one of Hollywood's most well-known comics. This was not how Henry Gibson did things. He kept things simple while the rest of the show was loud and crazy. He would stand up, hold up a big flower, and say, "A poem by Henry Gibson." Then he would read a short, serious poem that was either totally silly or a smart take on current events. His calm presence stood in stark contrast to the show's crazy energy. Besides laughing, he used his fame to talk about environmental problems. He wrote poems and articles about it long before it became a popular cause. It was impossible to avoid Joanne Worley. People were drawn to her because of her loud voice, crazy outfits, and funny style. It felt like a performance every time she told a joke. She often sang in an over-the-top operatic way or added a dramatic pause before a joke to make it funny. Her collection of jokes against chickens became one of her most famous running gags. They were so strange that they became a part of who she was. Some of the most memorable parts of the show were created by Artie Johnson and Ruth Buzzi. Someone on Johnson's show was a German soldier named Wolfgang. He would quickly appear out of a bush and say, "Very interesting, but stupid." This line became one of the most famous from the show. Another one of his figures is named Tyrone F. Horney, or Horney, was a creepy old man who spent every show trying to flirt with Gladys Ormsby, played by Ruth Buzzi, but never succeeded. She did a great job with the part. When Tyrone got too close, Gladys was always ready to swing her purse at him. She was grumpy and dressed down. People in the crowd laughed out loud every time she hit him. Simple things were always done, but they never got old. Buzzi was nominated for 5 Emmys and a Golden Globe for her role on the show, which made her one of its biggest stars. Guest stars were one of the things that made Laugh-In stand out. You never knew who would show up. John Wayne showed up one time in a bunny suit. Sammy Davis Jr. gave the sketches his own unique brand of cool. Orson Welles, who was known for having a deep, powerful voice, joined in the fun. But Richard Nixon was the most surprised guest. Richard Nixon did something no one saw coming in 1968. He went on national TV and tried to be funny. The Republican presidential candidate looked into the camera and asked, "Sock it to me?" for 6 awkward seconds. He spoke slowly and stiffly. His tone wasn't clear, but it worked in some way. A lot of people laughed. In one of the most close races in U.S. history, that one small thing may have helped him win. The country was in a lot of trouble that year. The Vietnam War went on for too long. There were protests everywhere. Both Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy were killed. It felt like America was breaking up. Nixon was looking to get back into politics after losing the race for president in 1960 and the race for governor of California in 1962. People thought he was serious, cold, and out of touch, which was his biggest problem. The next show was Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. It was the most watched TV show in the U.S. It was quick, loud, and unexpected. Young people loved the short comedic sketches and catchphrases that were in it. Everything was made fun of on the show, even politics. Some of Nixon's advisors thought it was a bad idea for him to go on Laugh-In. Some people thought it might make him seem more likable. A Republican writer for the show named Paul Keyes, who backed Nixon, worked hard to get it done. He said that some humor could change how people felt about Nixon in a short amount of time. On September 12, Nixon went to NBC's Burbank studios to film his part. But there was something wrong. The people who were making the movie wanted Nixon to say something silly like, "You bet your sweet bippy." Nixon refused. He didn't want to look stupid because he didn't understand the phrase. He finally agreed to say one line, "Sock it to me." Even that was hard for him. 6 takes were needed to get a version where he didn't look mad or confused. George Schlatter, the producer of the show, later said that he rushed the video out of the studio because he was afraid that Nixon's team would try to stop it from airing. People were shocked when the show aired on September 16. Nixon showed up for only 6 seconds, but it caused a big stir because it was so unexpected. The way he was acting made people laugh. He didn't seem funny or likable, but he did seem like a real person. That was important in politics. Nixon's appearance was seen by millions of people because Laugh-In was the most popular show on TV at the time. A few political experts think it helped him win over people who weren't sure yet, especially younger ones. He beat Hubert Humphrey by less than 1% of the popular vote, so the race was very close. It was a very close race. So every second was important, but Humphrey did something wrong. Also, Laugh-In asked him to be on and gave him a simple line, "Yes, please do sock it to me." He turned it down, though. He believed it would show that he wasn't taking things seriously. Nixon chose to risk it, but Humphrey didn't. At the end of the day, one candidate used current media and the other didn't. Politicians often appear on late-night talk shows these days, but it was risky in 1968. It worked out for Nixon. Harry Belafonte shot a sketch for Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In in 1969, but it was never shown. It was meant to make a strong point. What played behind him really made an effect, though. It was the Calypso song, "Don't Stop the Carnival." The screen was filled with footage from the 1968 Democratic National Convention protests in Chicago. Instead of the normal bright and colorful set, there was this. Police were hitting people who were protesting in the streets. There was tear gas in the air. People at the protest said, "The whole world is watching." It was honest, raw, and hard to ignore. One of the most shocking events in modern American history was the protests. A lot of people came together in Chicago to protest the Vietnam War. They ran into a huge group of cops and National Guardsmen. When things got really bad, it was on August 28th outside of the Conrad Hilton Hotel. Batons were swung at marchers who were not armed. People ran away when tear gas was used. Reporters caught the chaos on live TV so everyone in the country could see what was going on. Now that it had been a year, Belafonte wanted everyone to remember. NBC wouldn't show it. The bosses believed it was too dangerous. They were afraid of backlash, especially from marketers and audiences who were conservative. When the video was first shown in 1968, it made people all over the country very angry. When it was put together with Belafonte's song, it became even more angry. That was too risky for the network to take. The whole segment was cut off before it could be seen. Censorship like this wasn't new. In the 1960s, TV networks were very picky about what they showed. They didn't talk about racist issues, war, or police violence because they didn't want to lose listeners or sponsors. Even Laugh-In, which is known for breaking rules, had to be careful. Later, the show's creator, George Schlatter, said that cutting Belafonte's segment was a mistake. It could have been one of the most powerful things ever seen on TV. Belafonte didn't say nothing. He said that NBC's choice was weak. He fought for civil rights for years with his music and fame. He thought this censorship showed that networks cared more about making people feel good than telling the truth. It became a what if, a moment that could have been important in history but was removed before anyone could see it. Besides that, Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In made fun of Vice President Spiro Agnew in 1969. He often used strong, exaggerated language to attack people who were against the Nixon government. One of his most famous lines was, "Nattering nabobs of negativism," a word written for him by speechwriter William Safire. He loved alliteration and often used phrases like pusillanimous pussyfooters and an effete corps of impudent snobs. His language made him an easy target for satire. Laugh-In jumped on the chance and exaggerated his style, turning him into a larger-than-life caricature. Agnew and the Nixon White House did not like it. It was said that his office called NBC to complain. But this was more than just a joke at his expense. It was a sign of the growing divide between officials and the media. Millions of people watched Laugh-In every week, making it one of the most popular shows on TV. It showed how comedy was becoming a strong way to talk about politics by making fun of Agnew. Agnew wanted to get Nixon's quiet majority to support him by criticizing the press and smart people. He turned himself into an easy joke instead. His response to the parody only reinforced the idea that he could dish it out but couldn't take it. The more he fought back, the more comedians used him as a subject for their jokes. This moment showed how fun can show how silly politics are. At a time when the country was very split over Vietnam and civil rights, comedy was doing more than just making people laugh. It was changing how people thought about things. Another way Laugh-In made its mark was through the Flying Fickle Finger of Fate award. This was one of the show's most popular running gags. Introduced in 1968, The Flying Fickle Finger of Fate award was given to people or organizations responsible for ridiculous or harmful actions. The prize itself was a gold hand with a pointing finger mounted on a wooden base. It was a funny but direct way of calling someone out. President Lyndon B. Johnson was one of the first winners. The show made fun of him for making the Vietnam War worse. The Pentagon also got the award for wasting taxpayer money on directories that became outdated almost immediately. Laugh-In had a way of turning real frustrations into humor, calling out government waste and hypocrisy without making the show feel heavy or preachy. The Fickle Finger of Fate worked so well because it brought up important issues in a fun way. The show didn't get shut down because it made political criticism funny, but the people it made fun of did notice. Sometimes the reactions from politicians made the joke even funnier. The segment proved that television wasn't just for entertainment, it had the power to influence public debate. In 1970, Laugh-In took an even bigger risk with a sketch that got a lot of attention right away. Police cops were compared to pigs in the segment. The image had been popularized by the Black Panther Party, which used it in cartoons to protest police violence. At the time, it was shocking to see this kind of imagery on mainstream TV. The FBI thought it was a big issue. The FBI started COINTELPRO, a secret operation to discredit radical groups. When J. Edgar Hoover was in charge, Hoover said that the Black Panthers were the most dangerous group to American safety. People thought that any news outlet that seemed to side with them was dangerous. As soon as Laugh-In showed the sketch, people were upset. Law enforcement groups were furious and accused the show of promoting anti-police propaganda. The controversy reflected the deep divide in the country. Protests against police brutality were becoming more common, and the Black Panthers had forced a national conversation about racial injustice. Some people who saw the sketch thought it was a true reflection of the times. Others saw it as an attack on law enforcement. The reaction showed how powerful comedy could be. The show also faced backlash from early LGBTQ+ activists. Tiny Alice, played by Dick Martin in drag, was a character that showed up over and over again. The character was supposed to be funny, but it was based on over-the-top images of gay men who act girly. At a time when LGBTQ+ people were fighting for respect, this kind of image felt damaging. But it wasn't just about Laugh-In, it was about the way Hollywood treated gay characters in general. Drag performances in popular media often played into the idea that being gay was something ridiculous. Activists wanted depiction that didn't reduce them to a joke. It got even hotter because of the time. It had only been a year since the Stonewall riots. LGBTQ+ activists were speaking out more and asking for better treatment in the media and other places. A character like Tiny Alice sent the message that queer identity was something to laugh at rather than take seriously. Laugh-In's creator, George Schlatter, defended the show. He claimed that it made fun of everyone equally. But for campaigners, that defense didn't hold up. There were different kinds of jokes about powerful people and jokes about underrepresented groups. As attitudes changed over time, these kinds of portrayals would become less common. In the early 1970s, though, queer identity was still seen as an easy joke in mainstream comedy. It was also never planned for Arte Johnson's famous catchphrase, "very interesting," to be used. It was an accident, and some people didn't like it. Johnson played Wolfgang, a German soldier who had no idea what was going on and still thought World War II was happening. In one scene, he threw in the line "on the spot." The phrase came from a 1942 film called Desperate Journey, but the way Johnson delivered it, deadpan with perfect timing, made it unforgettable. The audience loved it. The producers, not so much. They were afraid that too much improvising would throw off the fast-paced beat of the show. Johnson didn't stop, though, and soon that line was one of the most quoted on TV. Fans began saying it everywhere. What started as a small joke turned into one of Laughlin's most iconic moments. Goldie Hawn's smile lit up the screen, but behind it she was struggling. She joined Laughlin when she was just 22, playing the bubbly blonde that America fell in love with, but the pressure was crushing her. Every day she felt like she had to be perfect, always funny, always happy, always on. It was tiring. She later stated that she cried almost every single day during her time on the show. The fast-paced schedule left no time to breathe. If a joke didn't land, if a scene didn't go well, she felt like she was failing. The stress led to panic attacks. She started going to therapy just to get through it. After 3 seasons, she couldn't take it anymore. She left the show in 1970 and took a chance on film. It was the best choice of her life. Her role in Cactus Flower won her an Oscar, and Hollywood gave her the creative freedom she had never felt on Laugh-In. But even as her career took off, she didn't forget what she went through. Later in life, she became an advocate for mental health, using her own struggles to help others. She had spent years making people laugh while battling her own fears, and she wanted to make sure others knew they weren't alone. Even though Laugh-In liked making people angry, it still had to deal with editors. In 1969, one of the strangest happened because of one word: pregnant. At the time, people in charge of the networks thought it was inappropriate for TV. It was seen as rude to say the word out loud, even in a joke. Ruth Buzzi was caught in the act, holding a sign that said, "Make war, not love," while her character was clearly pregnant. NBC executives became scared. They wanted it changed, afraid of upsetting conservative viewers. Producer George Schlatter refused. He claimed that if Laugh-In could get away with risque jokes and double entendres, then there was no reason pregnant should be off limits. The show had always pushed limits, and this was no different. He didn't give in because he knew the network couldn't lose Laugh-In's huge following. NBC finally gave up. The word stuck around and the sketch aired. It was a small victory, but it mattered. It showed that television was changing. What once had been thought too controversial was slowly becoming normal. By the time Laugh-In reached its 5th season in 1971, something had changed. It no longer had the same amount of energy that made it a phenomenon. It was felt by the audience. The same jokes, the same catchphrases. What once felt fresh now seemed expected. Goldie Hawn and Lily Tomlin quit to go after bigger roles. Their absence left a hole that was hard for new cast members to fill. The ratings went down by almost 40%. Things weren't any better behind the scenes. The show's first producer, George Schlatter, also left around this time. Without him, Laugh-In failed to evolve. Television was changing fast. The early 1970s brought a shift in humor, moving away from quick gags and absurdity toward something more grounded. Audiences wanted humor that reflected the real world. Laugh-In tried to keep up but never quite found its footing. By 1973, NBC had turned off the show after 6 seasons. On May 14, 1973, the last show aired. The show wasn't even close to what it used to be. A simple but honest line from Dan Rowan at the end of the episode, "We've just run out of gas." It was a rare moment of truth on TV. The show broke rules, pushed the limits, and changed what comedy was all about. But everything ends. This was the moment Laugh-In said goodbye. Its influence, however, didn't disappear. In 1975, only 2 years after that, Saturday Night Live began, and the connections were hard to miss. Laughter that moves quickly, the sketch that was hard to predict, the way it used humor to reflect the world. Lorne Michaels, SNL's creator, has never denied the link. Laugh-In laid the foundation. Saturday Night Live built on it. Both shows launched stars. Laugh-In gave the world Goldie Hawn and Lily Tomlin. Saturday Night Live debuted Chevy Chase and Gilda Radner. Both made running jokes that stuck in people's minds. But there was a key difference. Laugh-In loved silly and funny things. Saturday Night Live was better. Not only did it make people laugh, it also said something.